Next, I'd like to talk about kind of, again, the somewhat passive attributes you find among people in Central Asia. Whenever people are speaking to each other, interacting or writing, they'll always often use a passive voice form of explaining situations or something that has happened. In the West, particularly in the United States, we're trained never to use the passive voice. If something happens, you always explain what happened and who did it and how the event was triggered and what is the result. And one very funny instance I can use as an example is that we were in a staff meeting of the World Bank office in Almaty, and someone, high-level person, came from headquarters to Kazakhstan and was driving to Kyrgyzstan, but forgot to get a visa to get into Kyrgyzstan. So they got to the border and they were held there. And this was a big kind of to-do during the staff meeting that morning in Almaty, the regional office. And one of our colleagues who was explaining what happened said, this person got to the border with her driver, and there was a problem because there was no visa. And I think I was the only American there, and I said, excuse me? What do you mean there was no visa? You mean they ran out of visas, or they needed to get more printed, or there were no more available? And he said, no, there was no visa in her passport. And I pushed my colleague further and said, you mean she forgot to get the visa before she came over? And I started laughing and was the only one in the whole room that thought this was funny, because the way the local person described it, there was no visa, without explaining what the cause and result was. The reason why that was so funny is because the driver she had didn't speak any English, the person in question didn't speak any Russian, and then they were stuck at the border for more than half a day, where we had to have staff get a visa to be authorized at the border. So just an example of, again, how a situation is explained, avoiding attributing fault or responsibility or who did something or didn't do anything, but more in explaining an event that happened without attributing why it happened. As far as interacting and writing styles, this I think is related. You find a less direct way of talking to people, discussing issues. People will talk around issues where they detect there's disagreement. And Americans, we tend to be very, very direct, probably the most direct people in the world, and so you just have to get used to this. If you're editing documents that were translated to English, you'll find again the same thing, talking around a lot of points before getting directly to a point, and often you'll find the main points are made at the end of the document rather than at the beginning.